Next up we have Easy Aces, which I'm sure you'll enjoy. A little bit about the history of the show. Goodman Ace was a movie and drama critic for the Kansas City Journal-Post. He married Jane Sherwood, like himself, a native of Kansas City. He began reading the comics on local radio Sunday mornings for $10 a show. Later, he began doing The Movie Man based on his newspaper reviews, also at 10 a show. He was finishing his Movie Man stint one night when the program director frantically motioned him to stay on the air. It seems the performers for the next 15-minute program hadn't arrived at the station, and they were on the spot. So Ace, finally with his material exhausted, began to ad-lib. Jane, standing nearby, jumped into the breach, and they started an on-the-air dialogue. They talked about last night's bridge game and any other subject that popped into their heads. Favorable reaction poured in, and the station put Easy Aces on as a regular feature. It became so popular that it attracted network attention. The Aces were brought to Chicago, and the show opened on CBS in October 1931. By 1935, the show was done out of New York, where it ran until January 1945. In February 1948, the show was revived on CBS, where it ran until 1949. Tonight's episode is a 1948 episode, so let's listen to tonight's episode of Easy Aces, Jane Thinks Mink.
Ladies and gentlemen, Easy Aces.
I ran across an interesting quotation the other day. I'd like to read it to you. No man is an island entire of himself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. Fine way to start a comedy program. What's happening to radio? Well, to tell the truth, I didn't know exactly what it meant myself, so I read it aloud to Jane, and she said,
"Do you think I ought to let out the hem on this dress some more?"
And she's so right. Now there is a woman who lives on an island all by herself, up around Lake Marijuana. But back to the quotation. No man is an island, particularly on Manhattan, because our lives are knitted together in one stitched pattern. What you do depends on what I do. What I do depends on what Jane does. Whoops, dropped a stitch. What happened to me this past week demonstrates what I mean. You see, when Jane and I think of buying something expensive, we talk it over. For instance, when we thought of buying a used car, we found it wasn't what it was cracked up to be.
We thought of buying a used car, but it wasn't what it was jacked up to be.
Even when Jane goes to buy lingerie, I make various suggestions.
Even when I go to buy lingerie, he's very suggestive.
One of us never does anything without letting the other one know.
One of us never does anything without letting me know.
The other night after dinner, I was sitting around reading the paper, and Jane was going over her shopping list for the next day.
Now, let me see if I've got everything down that I want to buy tomorrow. Toothbrush, soap, cleansing cream, mink coat, and lipstick. Anything you need, dear?
Yes, it has been.
Dear, you're not listening. Put the paper away and look at my shopping list. Anything you want to add?
Let me see. Toothbrush, soap, cleansing cream, mink coat, and lipstick. No, I don't think so. Unless you want to return those ginger ale bottles. We get a nickel back on each bottle, and every little bit will... Help! Mink coat! What is this?
Where? Oh, yes, mink coat. Well, I meant to talk to you about that. Now, I'll make a lap, dear.
What?
Make a lap. I want to sit down.
Okay, I made a lap, but you're not gonna...
Oh, there now. Isn't this cozy? Oh, look, dear. Your lap's getting a front porch here.
Yes, and if you look around and back, you'll find a veranda. Now, Jane, about this coat.
Dear, I saw it again today. It's a dream. You know that shop around the corner?
Just to say hello to.
Well, I've been passing it every day, and there's this dreamy mink coat in the window. The girl wearing it looks so smart, but of course she's just a dummy. And so could I.
How much?
Oh, it's full length and it'll cover all my dresses.
How much?
It's the softest mink. It's wild.
Who isn't? How much, Jane?
That's just it. You haven't heard the half of it.
Well, how much?
$1,750.
That's pretty reasonable for a good mink coat.
Now you've heard the half of it. Altogether, it's $3,500.
What?
Now, dear, take it easy. Relapse. Remember your blood pressure.
Look, Jane, let's be reasonable. Where am I going to get that kind of money?
I knew you were going to say that. I knew it.
But, Jane, you know we can't afford to spend all that money.
Everybody gets some pleasure out of our money but me. Well, how about your sister's oldest boy when he had his tonsils out? And your brother's youngest girl when she had her adenoids out? You paid for all that. Everybody has a wonderful time on our money but me.
What wonderful times. Only...
Oh, and what about your mother's teeth? Now, who paid for that?
Leave my mother's teeth out of this.
Oh, and I mention your mother's teeth, they hurt. Well, I suppose you'll be happy if I don't get a fur coat and get pneumonia and have to spend the winter in an Oxidol tent.
That's a sparkling notion. Jane, look. Tell you what I'm going to do.
Oh, I knew you would, dear.
Wait a minute now. Listen to this. I've got a big advertising account coming up. Pretty good chance of getting it. It's for the Royal Paint Company. If I get it, there'll be a bonus in it for me, and then you can have the mink coat.
Oh, thanks, dear.
Wait, I said if I get the account. I have a 50% chance of getting it.
Oh, that's only the half of it, dear. You'll get it. You'll get it by hook or ladder. And if I'm wrong, I'm not far from it.
When I told Jane there was a 50% chance of getting the account, I wasn't kidding. The other 50% depended on how good business got at the Royal Paint Company. In fact, there was a certain color the paint company hoped to be out of, the red, if I'm not being too subversive. But no paint company is an island entire to itself. Watch how this pattern begins to weave. After I left the office the next morning, Jane got busy on the telephone.
Hello? Is this a Daniel's Fur Shop?
Yes, this is Mr. Daniels speaking.
Oh, I didn't recognize your voice. This is Mrs. Ace.
Oh, Mrs. Ace, I didn't recognize you either.
Just fine. Oh, Mr. Daniels, remember that mink coat I've been looking at?
I certainly do. A lot of women have been looking at it.
Yes, it certainly is. Well, Mr. Daniels, could you hold that coat for me?
You mean you're buying it?
Well, practically.
What do you mean practically?
Well, I talked to my husband about it last night, and he says it's 60% certain I can buy it.
Well, good for you, Mrs. Ace. That is, if he'll really let you buy it.
Oh, I'm sure he will, because if he didn't want me to, he would have come out right out flat-headed and said so. Doesn't it to you?
Tell you what, I don't usually hold coats without at least a deposit, but I have a certain reason for doing it for you. Because if you buy this coat, it'll come in mighty handy. My wife will be thrilled to hear about this. I'm going to call her now and tell her.
Hello?
Hello, Mrs. Daniels.
Yes, this is Mrs. Daniels.
Mrs. Daniels, this is a man named Daniels who claims to be married to you.
Oh, hello, John, you silly thing.
Oh, silly am I? Not too silly to buy you that home out in the suburbs you've been wanting so bad.
John, not really.
Well, now who's silly?
Oh, John, you don't mean it. Are we really finally going to buy it?
Well, it's practically ours,
Practically?
honey.
What do you mean practically ours?
Well, I'd say it's 70%.
70%?
Now, you know that mink coat I've had in the shop so long? Well, Mrs. Ace just called me and said her husband told her he was 70% certain she could have it.
But that's not definite, John.
But Mary, if he didn't want her to have it, wouldn't he have come out flat-headed and said she couldn't have it?
What?
Well, doesn't it to you?
John, you're so excited.
I certainly am. We've been dreaming about that house for some time now. You go right ahead and plan on it.
Oh, John, you're a darling. In fact, Mr. Beckley from the real estate office called me just a little while ago about the house. I told him to give us another day or two to think it over, and he was so understanding. Will he be surprised when I call him back now?
Beckley Real Estate, Mr. Beckley speaking.
Hello, Mr. Beckley. This is Mrs. Daniels again.
Oh, hello, Mrs. Daniels. You got some good news for me?
I think I have. If you call it good news that we're going to buy that house.
Well, congratulations, Mrs. Daniels. Your husband changed his mind rather suddenly, didn't he?
He certainly did. But the house is practically ours now.
What do you mean practically?
Well, Mr. Daniels just phoned me. He said it was 80% certain.
80%? That's not 100, Mrs. Daniels.
Well, if he didn't want me to buy it, wouldn't he have come out flat-headed and said so?
You're a little excited, aren't you, Mrs. Daniels?
Well, doesn't it to you?
Yes, I must admit it does. Or did. Or what was the question?
I said it's as certain as anything could be. And Mr. Beckley, I want to remind you that you promised to fix it up in good shape. It certainly needs a lot of renovating. I'll be out this afternoon and sign the papers and give you a deposit.
Good, and don't worry about renovating. It's going to be painted thoroughly. As a matter of fact, that's the last house we have in that subdivision out there. And now that you're going to buy it, I'm going to order a paint job for every house out there. In fact, I feel safe enough now in calling the paint people and putting in the order.
This Royal Paint Company, good evening.
This is Mr. Beckley. May I speak to Mr. Benson? He knows what it's about.
Just a moment, please.
Benson speaking.
Oh, good morning, Mr. Benson. This is Beckley out on the island.
Oh, yes, Mr. Beckley. What's the good word this morning?
The good word is that I'm going to put through that paint order.
Yeah? You finally got rid of that last house out there, huh?
Well, it's about 90% certain.
90%?
Well, I mean, the woman's husband didn't come out flat-headed and say no.
You're a little worked up, aren't you?
I certainly am. Now, I'm giving you this order in plenty of time. I ought to get delivery on the paint pretty quick, doesn't it to you?
It certainly does, I mean. Yes, it will. Or something. And that reminds me. I'm glad you called. I've been waiting to hear from you on this order before I did something myself. I gotta make a call. Thanks for the order, Beckley.
Yes, this is Mr. Ace.
This is Benson, Royal Paint.
Oh, yes, Mr. Benson. What's new?
Well, looks like we're gonna do some advertising.
Really? Gee, that's swell. I was just sitting here working out an idea for you.
Good. It's 99% certain. I can tell you now the reason I've been hesitating. We've been waiting on a pretty big paint order, and it looks now like we're gonna get it. As I say, it's 99% certain. I'll call you about 3 or 4 o'clock this afternoon and give you the definite okay.
Well, I think we can push that other 1% over by 3 or 4 o'clock.
That's the way I feel. If the man I was waiting for to come across with the order wasn't going to buy the paint, he'd have come out flat-headed and said it so. Doesn't it to you?
Oh, sure, Jay. Mr. Benson. What did you say?
Tell you what we want to do, Mr. Ace. I'd like to have you concentrate on one particular quality of our paint. It's a one-coat paint.
One coat? That's funny.
What?
Nothing. I was just thinking of that one coat. That kind of reminds me of something I was talking to Mrs. Ace about last night. I'll be working on an idea, Mr. Benson. I've got to make a call right now.
Hello?
Hello, Jane. Guess what?
You mean guess who, don't you, dear?
No. I mean, guess what happened? Got a call from the paint company. And the deal is 99.75% certain.
Oh, that's a shame. I want a full-length coat, not 3/4.
Isn't that awful? It looks like I'm going to get their advertising. The guy didn't turn me down, Jane. He didn't come right out flat-footed and say no.
Oh, that's wonderful. You mean I can have that coat? And
You certainly can. I promised you. But better wait till about 3 or 4 o'clock. I expect to get a call from Mr. Benson definitely okaying the deal by that time.
3 or 4 o'clock. Okay, dear. I'll be waiting on pins and cushions.
Well, 3 o'clock came, 4 o'clock came, my shadow came, and still no call from the Royal Paint Company. How was I to know he was waiting to hear from somebody else, who was waiting to hear from somebody else, who was waiting to hear from Jane, who was waiting to hear from me? A sort of tinkers to Evers to 50% chance. How vicious can a circle be? Finally, I decided to take a chance myself. I called the Royal Paint Company.
Royal Paint Company.
This is Mr. Ace. May I speak to Mr. Benson, please?
Just a moment, please, Mr. Ace.
Benson speaking.
This is Mr. Ace. I didn't get your call, and I thought I'd take a chance. You said it was 99% certain.
Well, it was. But I've been waiting to hear from a certain party, and I haven't heard from him. I think I'll give him a ring right now, Mr. Ace, and find out what's going on.
Is that you, Mr. Beckley?
Yes, who was this?
This is Mr. Benson. What happened to that paint order?
Well, I've been waiting to hear from that woman who was going to buy that house. She told me it was 90% certain. I think I'll give her a ring and see what's going on.
Yes, this is Mrs. Daniels.
Oh, Mrs. Daniels, this is Mr. Beckley. How about that house? Weren't you coming over to sign the papers and make a deposit?
Well, I was, Mr. Beckley. I was 80% certain I was. But I've been waiting to hear from my husband. I haven't heard from him all day. I'll tell you what I'll do, Mr. Beckley. I'll give him a ring and I'll be back to you very soon.
But honey, I expected to hear from Mrs. Ace and she hasn't called me. She told me it was 70% certain.
Well, Mr. Beckley is calling me like mad, John.
I'll call up Mrs. Ace and find out what goes on. I'll see you later, honey.
But, Mr. Daniels, I've been waiting on pins and cushions all afternoon to hear from my husband, and he said it was 60% certain.
Well, why hasn't he called?
Oh, but he hasn't called me up. I've been sitting at this phone till I'm black and blue, and I even took 4 showers.
4 showers?
Well, the phone always rings when I'm in the shower.
And he hasn't called you?
No, he hasn't.
Mrs. Ace, you're not kidding me, are you? Are you sure your husband didn't say no? Come clean now.
Come clean? Mr. Daniels, I told you about the 4 showers. I'm going to call up Mr. Ace and see what's going on or not.
No, Jane, I haven't heard from him. If I had, I'd have called you. I phoned him and told him to let me know, and he hasn't called me. Looks like the coat's off.
But dear, what'll I tell Mr. Daniels to do with the coat?
No comment. Are you lost? Well, don't get discouraged. It gets even more complicated now. Another character has crept into the melee. That's our next-door neighbor, Ken Roberts. Jane is his biggest fan. They exchange confidences. This was their latest exchange.
So you see, Ken, I'm really in a quarry.
Well, Jane, I don't like to interfere in anything as personal as trying to make your husband buy you a mink coat.
Yes, Ken, but... Oh, go ahead, but what?
What do you mean, but what?
I don't know, but there's usually a but on the end of I don't like to interfere. Say it, Ken. But what?
Oh, nothing. I just don't like to interfere.
Oh, I thought there was going to be a but.
No.
Oh.
But that reminds me, Jane.
Yes, I thought so. You don't like to interfere, but what?
But I think if your husband didn't say no exactly, you should have the mink coat. What you ought to do is order it, and then it'll be too late.
You mean I ought to get the coat without waiting for him to say if I should?
Well, he didn't say no, Jane.
Well, no, but he didn't say yes.
But he said it was 60% certain, you told me.
Yes, but that leaves about, let me see, 60 from 100. Odd from odd is,
It's good enough for a good size maybe, Jane. And if you ordered the coat and had your initials put in the satin lining, it'd be too late for him to change his mind.
I couldn't do that, Ken.
Well, I would if I were you.
Well, if you're going to talk me into it, Ken, I will.
Now, wait a moment. Don't blame me for this. All I said was, if you had your initials put in the lining...
Get thee behind me, satin. Ken, I'm gonna do it. You're a godsend.
Well, if you own any stock in American Tell and Tell, hang on to it. Because here we go again. Jane has made up her mind to buy the coat and is now about to start that business cycle. A cycle built for 6.
Hello? Is that you, Mr. Daniels?
That's right.
Well, Mrs. Ace, this is Mr. Daniels.
What did you say?
Daniels. A-C-E, Daniels. Jane, Daniel. Jane Ace. Oh, now I've got it.
Oh, yes, Mrs. Ace. Am I glad to hear from you?
Just fine. It's about those initials, Mr. Daniels. I'll take the coat.
Initials?
J.A. in the lining. Will you put the initials in?
Then your husband said it was all right?
We'll cross him when we come to it. I'll be down for a fitting and we'll talk of it all over.
Gee, that's swell, Mrs. Ace. I'm sure glad you called. I appreciate it. My wife appreciates it. I'll phone her right now.
John, dear, is it really true?
It sure is, honey.
I'll call Mr. Beckley right away.
Well, Mrs. Daniels, I'm very happy for you.
Isn't it wonderful, Mr. Beckley?
And don't you worry about that paint job. I'll attend to it right away.
Yes.
Yes, sir, Mr. Beckley. This is Mr. Benson.
That order for that paint, it's official now.
Well, thank you. Good. I'll take care of it right away.
Yes, Mr. Benson, this is Mr. Ace. I was wondering...
Sorry to have held you up this way, but I just this minute got the confirmation on that advertising.
Oh, wonderful, Mr. Benson. When can I see you?
Well, suppose I drop down to your office first thing in the morning.
Fine. I'll have some layouts for you. I've got several good ideas for some billboard advertising.
Don't forget that one coat of paint.
Oh, yes, that one coat. I mustn't forget that one coat, especially. No, wait a minute. It's not over. I know the story sounds as if it's finished and Jane gets the coat and I get the account, and at this point I should be saying, well, we're a little early, folks, so hello, but you don't know Jane. And I want to warn you at this point that everything gets a little tricky here. So watch it closely, because we won't repeat this. Here we go. I'm sitting in my office after getting the good news about the advertising order for the paint company, when who should come in but...
Hello, dear.
Well, Jane, I was just going to call you.
Just fine.
Sit down. What's the matter? You look a little beat.
You mean this hangnail expression?
Yes, that
Dear, I've done the most terrible thing I've ever done in all the years we've been married in 7 months.
What did you...
But first, I want to tell you how terrible I feel about it, and I'm going to cancel it.
What did you...
And I also want you to know that I didn't do it of my own violation. I was talked into it by somebody I should have known better.
What did you...
And I realize now that I could never wear it with a clear conscience, no matter how cold it gets.
What did you... Oh, are you finished? What did you do? Can't wear what? You don't mean you ordered that mink coat without even waiting to find out if my deal went through?
In other words, yes.
What other words?
Oh, but don't worry, dear. I'm going to call and cancel it. And I told him to go ahead with it, but I still have time to stop him. I may have to pay for the initial cost.
The initial cost?
I told him to put my monocle in the lining.
Your monocle?
But I'm going to cancel the whole thing, and no sooner done the better. Now, give me that phone.
Wait a minute, Jane. Wait. Put that down. You don't have to cancel it. I just put over that deal I was telling you about. So you can get the coat and wear it with a clear conscience no matter how cold it gets.
No, dear, that's very sweet, but it's too late. I already did the damage, and this is going to be a lesson to me. And you have to take the bitter with the better, I always say, and until things get better, I'll be satisfied with the bitter. Now, don't you think I better?
Jane, look. The deal is made. You can get the coat.
No, dear, not by a bomb site. Now, a person mustn't run around half-crocked buying mink coats.
Well, who's half-crocked?
I'm going to teach me a lesson if it's the last thing I do.
Well, if you insist on canceling the coat, okay. I'm not going to argue with you.
I'm sorry it has to be this way. PL 3634, and maybe after this I'll remember to at least ask my husband about it. My own flesh and bones. If I keep doing things like this, I'm kissing my happy home. Hello?
This is Mr. Daniels. Who's this?
Oh, hello, Mr. Daniels. You know that mink coat I was looking at?
Yes.
Well, I'm not looking at it anymore. Cancel it.
Oh, this is terrible. Goodbye, Mrs. Ace. I've got to call my wife.
Oh, no, you can't do that, John.
I'm sorry, Mary, but that woman canceled the mink coat just now. It's off. Call Beckley and call off the house.
But, Mrs. Daniels, you can't call it off now. I thought I had the house sold to you.
And I thought my husband had a mink coat sold, but the customer just canceled it.
And now you're canceling the house. Oh, brother, I've got some canceling to do myself.
What's that? What do you mean you don't want the paint?
I'm sorry, but that's the way it is.
But you told me you had that house sold out there to Mrs. Daniels.
I thought I had it sold to her, just like Mrs. Daniels thought her husband had a mink coat sold to another woman who just called up and canceled the coat.
You mean the whole thing depended on somebody's mink coat?
That's the way it looks. And that's why I'm canceling that paint order.
Oh, that reminds me. I got some canceling to do myself. Goodbye.
But, Mr. Benson, what happened?
What is it, dear?
You heard me. The advertising campaign is called off.
But why? I should get a reason. What am I going to say around the office here? Was it anything I said?
What is it, dear?
No, nothing like that. It's all because, oh, you wouldn't believe me, Mr. Ace. It's too fantastic.
What is it, dear?
Jane, will you leave me alone? Go home.
What did you say?
No, I was just talking to Mr. Benson. What is this fantastic reason you mentioned?
Okay, I'll tell you. Mink coat.
Oh, what?
You see? I told you wouldn't believe it.
Yes, I will. I just didn't understand you. Sounded as if you said mink coat. Must have it on my mind. What did you say?
Mink coat.
Oh, you did say mink coat.
I did. Mink coat. Mink coat. Mink coat. There, I said it again.
But what about a mink coat? What's that got to do with this advertising campaign for your paint company?
Okay, you asked for it. Some lunkhead promised his wife a mink coat. Then he backed out. So the woman's husband, who sells mink coats, had his wife cancel a house he was going to buy. And the man who was going to sell the house called me up and canceled a big order for paint. And now I'm canceling that advertising campaign.
You mean it all depended on some...
Silly, isn't it?
But Mr. Benson, after all, if you want an advertising campaign...
Look, old man, there's no use taking it up with me. It all goes back to Mr. Daniels now. If the Daniels First Shop sells that mink coat, we can talk business. Hello?
Excuse me, I dropped the phone. Just hold the phone a minute, please.
Well, make it snappy.
Jane.
Honestly, dear, the way you talk on the phone, no one can understand what's going on. Can't you use words with more than one cylinder? Dear, what's the matter? You're as pale as a goat.
Jane, did I just hear you call a Mr. Daniels to cancel that mink coat?
Yes, that's the first shop around the corner I was telling you about.
Isn't that awful? Jane, you almost ruined a whole big advertising campaign for me.
Me for you, me for you.
And me for you, and T for two.
Oh, how did I do anything at your old advertising campaign? I don't know anything about it.
I know. And still you almost ruined it.
Well, how can I do that?
It's a gift, Jane. It's going to be okay on that mink coat paint. I mean that one coat paint.
We hope you enjoyed that show and gave it 100%. Mr. Ace was Herb Thompson. Jane Ace was played by Donna Amesmeyer. Daniels, the first shop owner, was Jay Summerfield. Mary, Mrs. Daniels, was Ellie Babka. Beckley, the realtor, was Bob Dolan. Benson, the paint shop owner, was Andre Dixon. Ken Roberts, the next door neighbor, was Roger Morris. The paint shop receptionist was Nell Brennan. Providing sound effects was Marty McNulty. Our technical crew was John Gelsomino and Lorenzo Cordova. And I'm your announcer, Dave Sanchi. We'd also like to thank the Riverside Township Board for their support and for our latest toy, the filter mic. And now here's our director for next month's show, Roger Morris.
Well, we hope you enjoyed the program today. And next month, we're always the last Friday of the month, usually. And it will be, next time, it'll be February 27th. And we're going to be putting on 2 programs again. We hope to see you all next month, the last Friday. And the first one of the shows will be The Adventures of the Falcon. Falcon, with Max Waring as one who led it. And the show is the case of the murdering Mrs. We'll see if you can figure, no, I'm not sure we're going to do that again. And the other program will be the Magnificent Montague with the program Boo Boo and Foo Foo. And I don't know if we're going to have as much juggling of mics as we did today, but we'll do our best. And thank you so much for coming. We enjoyed having you here.